Hello, and welcome to Know Before You Go for the first Sunday of Lent. I'm Father Scott, and I'm here nowhere because Jesus is being led out into the wilderness, away from everything. We'll get to that though, because the first reading is from Deuteronomy. Moses telling the people, when you bring your first fruits of sacrifice, say this: my father was a wandering Aramean who went down to Egypt with a small household. And it goes on. Remember who you are and what God has done for you. And that's why you're given this. And we follow that same theme in the second reading, Paul's letter to the Romans. He reminds us that anyone who believes in your heart in Jesus and that God raised him from the dead will be saved. Everyone, Jew, Greek, doesn't matter. If you remember, if you believe, then you will be saved. So that's the context then for this lovely gospel of Jesus being led out into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, led out by the Spirit to be tempted by the devil. So he's not thrown out into the desert like other gospels, led by the Spirit, but through the wilderness. So the wilderness is constantly changing. But since it's wilderness, it's away from everything. It's a chance for Jesus to let go of all those other voices and hear only his own, and God's voice coming to him from the Spirit. Oh, and that other spirit that's there, the devil. And so he's tempted 3 times. And that's what we want to really look at here. The first one: if you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread. And of course, Jesus answered, one does not live on bread alone. That's it. And the quote actually goes on that he's quoting from, but from every word that comes from God. What the devil is tempting into is something that's not crazy. Jesus is going to have a miracle multiplication of the loaves and fishes for his followers who are hungry. And it's been 40 days with no food. He's hungry. Why not do this one thing for himself? Because even Jesus, to come and be born, has emptied himself out from being his privileged position as the Son of God, as the second person of the Trinity. He has come to be one with us. And if he just makes himself some food when he's hungry, how is that being one with us? That temptation to just hold on and use his privilege, which you might say he has a right to, but he won't. He'll use that to help other people, not to help himself. So then we go on to the second temptation. He lifts him up to a high place where you can see all of the kingdoms of the world. The funny thing about that is we're believers in a flat earth here, right? That you go high enough, you can see everything. There's no backside to the planet. But then, the devil says, all of this has been given to me, and I will give it to you if you but worship me. And Jesus, of course, says, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone shall you serve. First, the devil is a liar. It has not been given to him, and he certainly isn't going to give it over to anyone else, worship him or not. But what Jesus is doing is he's putting this temptation in the context of bigger beliefs. So, what God wants from us is his worship alone. We were wandering Aramaeans, we were nobodies, and God made us somebody. God made us somebody. Don't forget that. So it's this remembering who we are and what is important, as Paul says, remember this always and you will be saved. So there's no making a deal with the devil. That will never work. But then the third temptation, he takes him to the parapet of the temple in Jerusalem. Now in Luke's telling of the story, Jerusalem is the center, and the center of Jerusalem is the temple. So Jesus is in the center of the universe, of everything that's important. And the devil says to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For God said, and angels will protect you. And Jesus says, of course, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. The funny thing is, Jesus could walk on water. Remember, he doesn't need God to even save him. He could jump out of that parapet and land softly on the ground. It would be a miracle, but Jesus can do miracles. What he won't do is a cheap parlor trick to prove to Satan who he is, or to flex his muscles in some way. And he won't use his power, again, for his own good or glory. He has given up his privileged position, not using his power for his own, not expecting God to bail him out of every problem he comes in. He came to live as one of us. And so he will live as one of us who, if he stepped out of that parapet, he would fall. So, we could go a lot of ways with this in our own thinking about Lent. But I think the most important thing is Lent is supposed to be our 40 days led through the wilderness so that we can be tempted as Jesus was and answer as he did. So for 40 days, we don't grab hold of our own privilege. We might have a right to a lot of things, and we forego them for the sake of finding that strength inside of us that comes from knowing who we are once nobody's wandering Aramaeans, and what God has already done for us. And because we know that in our bones, then we can stand up to these temptations that are really all lies. They're all from the devil. And in our own lives, there's lots of lies that come to us from the world. So we go out into the desert, away from everything, in the wilderness, away from those voices that tempt us. True is there's wiggling room here. Or let's go with something that's effective rather than something that's actually true. We can tell ourselves we don't need to be dedicated to the truth. There's always wiggle room to get what we really want. But that's not the God that we worship. That's not what God wants from us, to buy into some lie for the sake of convenience, to speak some partial truth when we should know the whole truth, dedicating ourselves to living as people who are truly God's children. That's what our Lenten journey is all about. Remembering that in the fullness of what it means, so that when we're tempted to hedge here, there, wherever, we have the strength to say no. We know who we are, truly. God bless you and your Lenten journey.